For as long as humanity could remember, they had been laughed at by the stars. The great galactic civilizations had long since conquered and explored the vast reaches of space. They'd met countless alien species, some of them ancient, wise, and powerful. Earth was nothing more than a small, insignificant speck among them. In fact, humans were barely even noticed in the grand scope of the universe. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth was a low-class world, a planet plagued by constant chaos. Its atmosphere was filled with unpredictable weather patterns, storms so violent they could tear cities apart, earthquakes that cracked the ground wide open, and freezing winters that would drive even the toughest creatures to seek shelter. And that was only the start. The creatures on Earth, most of them far larger and far more dangerous than anything else the galaxy had seen, were a constant threat. Giant predators roamed the forests, while smaller creatures carried deadly diseases that could wipe out entire populations in days. Earth, to them, was a Class 3 planet at best, a barely survivable world with no real promise of advancement. The Unified Stellar Council, a governing body made up of dozens of advanced alien species, had long classified Earth as little more than a curiosity. It wasn't a planet worth spending time on. No serious effort was made to understand it beyond a few passing studies. They never considered the humans a serious threat. Earth was seen as a dangerous, unstable world where life was just scraping by. The idea that humans might one day become a force to reckon with seemed ridiculous. And so, humanity went on with its messy, chaotic existence, unaware that the galaxy had already written them off. The first time the Zelthar Dominion came to Earth, no one thought much of it. The Zelthars were an aggressive species, larger than humans, with thick, armored skin and a fierce reputation across the stars. They were known for their warlike nature, quickly overtaking weaker species with little effort. The Council had agreed that Earth's fate was sealed. If the Zelthars wanted it, the humans would be easy pickings. When the Zelthar fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, the Council barely noticed. There was no need for concern. Humanity had never shown any sign of being capable of defending itself against a true galactic power. The Zelthars would simply land, take control, and move on. The invaders' ships touched down without much resistance, deploying their soldiers on the ground. The Zelthar soldiers were confident. They had conquered countless worlds before. Earth, with its primitive technology, didn't seem like much of a challenge. They underestimated the planet's wild nature. What they didn't know was that every part of Earth, even the environment itself, was a constant fight for survival. It wasn't just the people who fought to stay alive. It was the planet. The Zelthars soon found themselves struggling in ways they never anticipated. Earth's gravity was heavier than they were used to. Every step they took felt like walking through thick mud. Their equipment, which had easily performed on countless other planets, malfunctioned in the unpredictable weather. The winds could pick up to hurricane speeds, the temperature could drop below freezing in minutes, and the air itself seemed to be filled with a strange, oppressive energy. They assumed it was just a temporary setback, but they had underestimated something far worse: Earth's wildlife. Within days, the invaders began losing soldiers to the creatures that roamed the planet. Large predators, beasts with teeth and claws capable of tearing through steel, began to pick off the Zelthar troops. Even their weapons, superior to anything humanity had developed, weren't enough to stop these creatures. Earth's animals were far more dangerous than anything the Zelthars had encountered before. The planet's ecosystems had evolved in such a way that creatures had adapted to fight for survival on every level. The Zelthar soldiers were overwhelmed, and panic began to spread through their ranks. Even their heavy armor and advanced weaponry couldn't protect them from the relentless dangers of Earth. What they had thought was an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. Meanwhile, humanity had no idea what was happening. Earth's population, for the most part, went on with their everyday lives. The world's military forces were scattered, with no central organization or cohesive defense. What Earth lacked in advanced technology, it made up for in sheer willpower. And when the Zelthars started their assault, It was clear that humans were willing to fight for their survival. What the galaxy didn't realize was that Earth wasn't just a chaotic world. It was a world that had bred one thing above all else: resilience. Humans had fought against the worst of nature, the most dangerous creatures, and the harshest environments for millennia. The concept of defeat was foreign to them. They had learned to adapt, to survive. As the Zelthars lost more ground, humanity's scattered military forces began to rally. What had initially seemed like a hopeless situation began to shift. Human soldiers, armed with basic, though effective, weapons, launched guerrilla tactics against the invaders. They used the land to their advantage, fighting from the forests, the mountains, and the ruins of their cities. They knew their planet better than the Zelthars ever could, and it gave them an edge. The Zelthars, accustomed to conquering worlds with ease, were now on the defensive. They couldn't escape the planet's brutal conditions, and soon their forces began to dwindle. The invaders had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight back with everything they had. But this was only the beginning. What the Zelthars didn't know was that Earth was just warming up. And the galaxy had made one terrible mistake. They had written off a planet that had been built for survival, a planet that had raised humans to become something more dangerous than any alien species could imagine. The joke of the galaxy, Earth, was about to show them just how wrong they were. The Zelthar Dominion had been so sure of their victory that they barely noticed how quickly things were going wrong. After all, they had conquered hundreds of worlds before. Earth should have been no different. But as they began to lose control of the situation, they started to realize their mistake, though it was already too late. The first warning signs came when their advanced scouting teams, which had been sent to gather information about Earth's inhabitants, began reporting strange events. The Zelthar soldiers were used to enemies running in fear at the sight of them, but the humans fought back with an unusual fierceness. The first few encounters were nothing but minor skirmishes, quick, decisive victories for the Zelthars. However, these skirmishes soon turned into something far worse. The humans were adapting quickly. They used everything they had, homes, forests, caves, even their own cities, as weapons against the invaders. Where the Zelthars had expected to see weak, scared civilians, they found angry, well-prepared humans ready to fight for their world. The humans didn't have the advanced technology that the Zelthars possessed, but they didn't need it. The planet itself seemed to fight alongside them. It was as though Earth was refusing to let them take it over. The invaders struggled to understand this. The Earth they had seen from space seemed like a place of chaos and weakness. They had no idea that the creatures and environments on the planet had evolved through countless struggles. It wasn't just humanity that had learned to survive. The entire planet had adapted, and every living thing on it was a product of that brutal evolution. The animals, plants, and even the weather had become sharp tools in the hands of the humans, who had learned how to make use of everything in their world to stay alive. As the battle raged on, the Zelthars began losing soldiers, not just from the humans but from the planet itself. Earth's wild creatures, which the invaders had underestimated, seemed to grow bolder by the day. A creature as simple as a wild boar had taken down one of their armored patrols. Even the plants on Earth seemed hostile, with thorny vines and poisonous flowers making their way into the Zelthar camps. But it wasn't just the wildlife. Earth's weather patterns were unlike anything the Zelthars had ever faced. The rain fell in torrential sheets, the winds howled with frightening intensity, and the temperature could drop below freezing in a matter of hours. The Zelthars were not prepared for the planet's chaotic and unpredictable nature. The longer they stayed, the more the planet seemed to work against them. Back on Earth's surface, the humans were slowly but steadily turning the tide. They had realized something the Zelthars had not. The invaders weren't just fighting against humanity. They were fighting against the entire planet. Earth had become a fortress, its landscape filled with dangers that only the humans knew how to handle. Humans weren't just defending their homes. They were using their own survival instincts, honed over thousands of years, to make sure they never gave up. But while the humans fought in the streets, the Zelthars had no idea how to adapt. Their advanced technology wasn't working on Earth's terms. Their ships, which had been designed for easy travel through space, couldn't handle the gravitational pull of the planet. Their weapons, which could level entire cities on other worlds, were useless against the creatures that had evolved to survive in Earth's hostile environment. And worst of all, they were starting to realize just how ill-prepared they were for a true fight. The invaders had assumed that taking Earth would be simple. They had planned to quickly subdue the population, claiming the planet's resources for their empire. But now, they found themselves trapped on a planet that seemed to fight back every time they tried to gain ground. It wasn't just the humans who were proving difficult. It was the planet itself, rejecting them in every way possible. In desperation, the Zelthar fleet attempted to call for reinforcements, hoping to turn the tide in their favor. But the more they fought, the more they were forced to retreat. There was something about Earth that made it different from all the other planets they had conquered. The humans' unyielding will to survive, combined with the wildness of the planet itself, was proving to be an insurmountable obstacle. Meanwhile, the humans, though under siege, were beginning to fight with a strength they had never known before. The Zelthars were not just invaders. They were a symbol of something far more terrifying. The galaxy's dismissal of Earth, the belief that humanity was nothing but a weak species on a chaotic world. As humans fought back, the message became clear. Earth might be wild, dangerous, and unpredictable, but it was alive. And humans, who had struggled against everything the planet threw at them for centuries, were not going to let anyone take it away from them. The Zelthars soon realized that they had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the humans, and worse, they had underestimated Earth itself. The invaders had thought the humans were fragile, just like the environment they lived in. But they had been wrong. The planet, just like the people, had been shaped by the harshest forces in the universe, and now they would have to pay the price. As the battle continued, the Zelthars found themselves more and more isolated. They had come to Earth expecting a quick victory, but now they were stuck in a war they couldn't win. Humanity, with its fierce will to survive and the unyielding forces of nature on its side, was proving to be far more than the invaders had bargained for. The humans were not the weak, primitive creatures the galaxy had imagined. They were something else entirely, something far stronger, far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. The Zelthar Dominion had underestimated humanity in the worst way possible. What they thought would be an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. Their soldiers, the proud warriors of an empire that had crushed countless civilizations, were now scattered and disoriented on a planet that refused to let them win. Earth wasn't just a battleground. It was a force in itself, a living entity that rejected the Zelthars every step of the way. As the days passed, the Zelthar forces began to realize just how deep they had miscalculated. Earth was a dangerous place, and the humans weren't just surviving. They were fighting. In the early days of the invasion, humanity had struggled to defend itself. Their military might was scattered, and many of their weapons were outdated by galactic standards. But the humans had something no other species seemed to understand: adaptability. The Zelthars were used to fighting enemies that followed predictable patterns, creatures that obeyed the same rules of warfare. But the humans didn't fight that way. They fought to win. They fought to survive. The humans, despite being outmatched in terms of technology, had the home field advantage. The terrain itself was on their side. Earth's forests, mountains, deserts, and cities became their battlegrounds. The humans knew every corner of their world. They knew how to use it against the invaders, setting traps and launching ambushes that the Zelthars couldn't predict. It wasn't just the humans who were fighting back. Earth's creatures, wild and untamed, were part of the struggle too. The Zelthar soldiers quickly found that they weren't just fighting against a weak human population. They were fighting against a planet that had evolved to be one of the most hostile places in the galaxy. The Earth that they had seen from space, a place of storms and extreme temperatures, was far more dangerous up close. The Zelfars, unfamiliar with the land, walked right into ambushes set by both humans and the creatures that lived in the wild. The humans took advantage of their knowledge of the land. They set up hidden camps in forests and underground bunkers, using the planet's natural resources to fuel their fight. They crafted weapons from the very environment the Zelfars thought they had already conquered. There were no clear rules of war on Earth. Humans didn't play by the same standards the Zelfars were used to. They struck when the invaders were least expecting it, always finding new ways to hurt them. In cities, the battle turned into a desperate game of cat and mouse. The Zelfars, used to commanding advanced technologies, were now faced with a guerrilla war that they couldn't anticipate. Humans didn't care about the rules of conventional warfare. When the Zelfars advanced into a city, they found themselves ambushed in every alley, every street. Makeshift bombs went off in the night, disrupting their operations. Explosives planted in sewer systems took out whole patrols. No matter how strong the Zelfars were, no matter how well armed, they couldn't escape the humans' ability to fight from the shadows. The Zelfars had made the fatal mistake of assuming that their superior technology would be enough to crush Earth's defenses. But what they didn't understand was that Earth's greatest weapon was the spirit of its people. Humans didn't just fight. They fought with everything they had. They fought with passion. They fought with the knowledge that their survival depended on their ability to outwit the invaders. The planet had shaped them into survivors, and they would never let it go easily. By now, the Zelfar soldiers were beginning to break. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, expecting to crush the humans underfoot and claim the planet as their own. But instead, they were losing ground. The more they fought, the more they realized that they were out of their depth. The planet was not a playground for invaders. It was a trap. Every attempt to advance was met with fierce resistance, and no matter how many soldiers the Zelfars sent, the humans seemed to multiply in strength. What was once a disorganized human resistance had now grown into something far more formidable. Local militias, soldiers, and ordinary citizens had come together, united by the one goal of pushing the invaders off their land. Humanity's ability to organize itself, even in the face of overwhelming odds, was remarkable. Leaders began to emerge from all parts of the world, individuals who could rally the people and inspire them to fight harder. A global resistance movement took shape, with humans coming together like never before. The Zelfars, realizing that their initial invasion had failed, began to send more reinforcements. However, the more soldiers they sent, the more they lost. Earth's natural forces continued to work against them. The planet's chaotic weather, already difficult for the Zelfars to manage, seemed to worsen with each passing day. Storms rolled in with a vengeance. The planet's temperature swung from freezing cold to sweltering heat in the span of hours. And the creatures that lived on Earth, once thought to be nothing more than an annoyance, began to hunt down the invaders with terrifying precision. The Zelfar fleet, now on the defensive, tried to regroup. They pulled their forces back, but each retreat felt like a defeat. Every time they tried to hold their ground, Earth's terrain and wildlife seemed to push them back. It wasn't just the humans who were defeating them. It was the planet itself. As the Zelfars retreated further into their camps, they began to realize the full scale of their mistake. They had come to Earth thinking it was just another world to conquer. But Earth was no ordinary world. It was a world that fought back, a world where its inhabitants had evolved to be as tough as the environment they lived in. And the humans, once seen as weak and fragile, were now proving to be a force to be reckoned with. The humans were no longer simply defending their homes. They were fighting for something much larger than themselves. They were fighting to protect their entire way of life, to defend a world that no one had ever truly understood or respected. And as they fought back, the message to the Zelfars became clear. Earth would never be theirs to take. The humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. As the war between the humans and the Zelfars stretched on, something shifted. The Zelfar Dominion, once so confident in their ability to conquer Earth, found themselves losing more than just battles. They were losing their grip on the planet itself. The Zelthars had arrived thinking Earth's inhabitants were weak, primitive, and divided. They had expected easy victories, a quick subjugation of a lowly species. Instead, they found themselves caught in a long, drawn-out conflict against a people who were far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. But now, the humans were ready to do something even more unexpected. A new sense of unity began to spread across Earth. The world's fractured nations, once divided by borders, politics, and conflicts, started to see beyond their differences. The common enemy, the Zelthars, had become a rallying point. Human beings, who had spent centuries fighting among themselves, now stood together, united by the very thing that had kept them alive for so long: survival. The first sign of this unity came in the form of a broadcast, a message that would change everything. A human leader, a woman named Naomi Alvarez, spoke to the world. She was no general, no military expert, but she was someone who understood the spirit of humanity. Her speech echoed across the planet, reaching millions of people from every corner of the globe. "We are not just fighting for our homes," she said, her voice steady but filled with passion. "We are fighting for every person who has ever walked this earth, for every child who still dreams of a future. We are fighting for our planet, a planet that is more than just a place to live. Earth is alive, and it is fighting alongside us. We will not let it fall." Her words ignited something in the hearts of the human race. A fire was sparked, and it spread quickly. People who had once been afraid, people who had thought the Zelthars were too powerful to stop, now stood tall. Militias that had once fought in small pockets of resistance grew into full-fledged armies. Small groups of survivors banded together into a global force, all with one goal in mind: to push the invaders off their world. Across the globe, humans began to take back territory. The Zelthars, caught off guard by the rapid growth of resistance, were forced to retreat. Their once strongholds fell one by one, and the invaders found themselves pushed to the brink. They had no idea how to stop the momentum that the humans had gained. Their once proud fleet, which had once cruised effortlessly through space, now seemed helpless as it faced off against Earth's unpredictable weather and wildlife. In the northern part of the world, a major turning point came when the humans launched a surprise attack on one of the Zelthar command centers. This command center had been one of the most fortified locations on the planet, protected by walls of steel and energy shields. The Zelthars had thought it was impenetrable. But the humans, using their knowledge of Earth's terrain, launched an assault at the heart of their defenses. They didn't need advanced technology to succeed. They simply needed their strength, their will to survive, and the unrelenting forces of the planet. The attack was swift and brutal. What was once thought to be a safe zone for the invaders was turned into chaos as the humans struck with precision. Using the mountains and caves for cover, they moved like shadows, outmaneuvering the Zelthars at every turn. The Zelthars were caught completely off guard, and within days, their command center fell. The humans had taken their first major victory, and it sent shockwaves through the Zelthar forces. Meanwhile, the humans had begun to harness a new kind of weapon: the Earth itself. They had learned how to use the planet's resources in ways that the invaders couldn't understand. They'd made use of the forests, the rivers, the very land beneath their feet. Earth's natural materials, which the Zelthars had dismissed as primitive, became the tools that helped humans push them back. Humans dug tunnels in the earth, setting up hidden bases deep underground. They used the rivers to move swiftly and quietly, launching attacks from unexpected places. The planet's wildlife, once a nuisance to the Zelthars, was now an ally. The creatures of Earth, long adapted to its harsh conditions, had learned to fight. The larger animals, like wolves, bears, and even wild boars, began to move closer to the human camps, helping them defend against the invaders. Even the plants on Earth, once seen as simple and harmless, became weapons. Poisonous berries, thorny vines, and prickly bushes were used to create barriers that slowed down the Zelthar forces. But the most powerful weapon the humans had was their spirit. The Zelthars had come to Earth expecting to face an unorganized, divided species that would fall apart under pressure. What they hadn't expected was the will of humanity to fight for their world, for their future. Every setback only made the humans more determined. Every loss fueled their desire to win. The more the Zelthars tried to push them back, the more the humans pushed forward. The tides of battle were slowly but surely turning. The Zelthars, once so confident in their victory, were now facing a force that refused to be crushed. They had misjudged Earth's inhabitants, underestimating their ability to adapt, survive, and unite when it mattered most. The humans had become something that the Zelthars could no longer ignore, a true force of nature. And now, as the battle reached its height, it was clear that the humans were not just defending their world, they were taking it back. The Zelthars had come to Earth thinking they could conquer it with ease. But the humans, driven by the unshakable knowledge that their survival depended on this fight, were showing them just how wrong they were. The galaxy had laughed at Earth. But now, as the battle raged on, they were beginning to see that Earth was not a joke at all. It was a Class 13 Deathworld, and humanity was proving it every single day. As the days passed, the Zelthar Dominion situation became more dire. What had once been a routine invasion was now spiraling out of control. Their advanced technology, their overwhelming numbers, and their carefully planned strategies seemed useless against a planet that fought back at every turn. The Zelthars were warriors, skilled in battle, but Earth was a world that didn't play by the rules. They had expected the humans to crumble under the pressure, to surrender their planet and their resources without a fight. Instead, they were faced with a relentless, unpredictable enemy who knew their home better than the invaders ever could. Every day, the humans learned new ways to use their world against the Zelthars, and every day, the invaders lost more ground. Even the very planet itself seemed to turn against them. The Zelthars had arrived on Earth with all the confidence of an empire that had conquered countless worlds, but now they were struggling to maintain control of the few areas they still held. Earth's weather, once viewed as a mere inconvenience, had become an enemy. The temperatures would drop suddenly, freezing Zelthar soldiers in their tracks, or the winds would pick up, sending dust storms through their ranks, blinding them and throwing their carefully laid plans into chaos. But it wasn't just the weather that made things difficult. Earth's animals, once thought to be harmless, had become an unexpected threat. The planet's creatures were not like those of other worlds the Zelthars had conquered. Earth's animals had evolved to survive in an unforgiving environment, and they were now turning against the invaders. Packs of wild dogs ambushed Zelthar patrols. Swarms of aggressive insects attacked their camps. Even the smaller animals seemed to have a deep hatred for the invaders, attacking with surprising precision. It was as if the planet itself had rallied against the Zelthars, and the humans, always in tune with the natural world, were quick to take advantage of this. The Zelthars' advanced weapons, which could easily destroy entire cities on other planets, were ineffective against Earth's strange and varied ecosystem. Their energy shields, designed to protect them from laser fire and projectile weapons, were useless against the wild forces of nature that seemed to pour in on them from all sides. The more they tried to fight back, the more they found themselves at the mercy of a world that refused to yield. Desperation began to set in. The Zelthars had come to Earth expecting to crush the humans quickly, but now they were bogged down in a war they couldn't win. The battles were becoming longer, bloodier, and more costly. And worse yet, the Zelthars' reinforcements, which had been sent to Earth in hopes of turning the tide, were meeting the same fate as the first wave. Their ships, though powerful, couldn't withstand the unpredictable storms and gravitational forces of the planet. Their soldiers, though well-trained, were no match for the guerrilla tactics of the humans and the fury of Earth's wildlife. In the highest council chambers of the Zelthar Dominion, the leaders began to discuss their next move. They had underestimated the humans, yes, but they couldn't afford to leave Earth empty-handed. The planet was rich in resources, and the Zelthars needed it. They needed Earth's minerals, its water, its energy. The Empire depended on it. "We cannot afford to lose this world," said High Commander Xorthar, his voice heavy with frustration. "If we allow the humans to defeat us here, it will be a blow to the Dominion that we may never recover from. We must find a way to break them." The council murmured in agreement, but no one had an answer. They had tried everything: advanced weapons, orbital bombardments, and even the deployment of their most elite troops. But the humans had adapted every time. The Zelthars were starting to realize that Earth was no ordinary planet. It was a death world, a place where only the toughest survived. And the humans, despite their relatively small size and lack of advanced technology, had learned to survive against the most dangerous forces nature could throw at them. The humans, however, were not sitting idly by. They knew that the longer the Zelthars remained on Earth, the more desperate they would become. And desperate enemies were the most dangerous. The humans knew they had to strike quickly, before the Zelthars could regroup and launch another major offensive. The human forces, led by Naomi Alvarez, were now operating as one. What had once been a collection of isolated militias and resistance groups had turned into a coordinated global army. Communications were being shared across borders, and resources were pooled together. Humanity was no longer fighting just to defend their homes. They were fighting to drive the invaders off their world entirely. The next major battle was set to take place in the heart of the Zelthar stronghold. The humans had discovered the location of a key supply base that the invaders were relying on to keep their forces supplied. If the humans could take control of this base, they would cut off the Zelthar's ability to fight. It was a risky move, but it was the best chance they had. Under the cover of night, human soldiers moved in, using Earth's natural landscape to stay hidden. They knew the terrain better than the Zelthars could ever hope to. They had prepared for every possible counterattack, knowing that the Zelthars would not give up without a fight. But what the invaders didn't realize was that they were facing an enemy who understood the value of patience and preparation. The humans launched their assault in the early morning hours. The battle was fierce, but the Zelthars were caught off guard. The humans had anticipated every move. The supply base, once thought to be secure, fell into their hands. It was a devastating blow to the Zelthars. Their supply lines were cut, and their forces, already stretched thin, found themselves with no way to sustain their war effort. For the first time since the invasion began, the Zelthars were on the back foot. The humans had taken a major victory, and it was a victory that sent a message across the globe. The invaders were not invincible. They were not gods. They were just another force in the universe, and they were being pushed back. Earth was no longer just a battleground. It was a symbol of humanity's determination to survive, to protect their world, and to fight back against those who would try to take it from them. And for the Zelthars, it was becoming painfully clear that Earth was a world they could never conquer. The tide had turned. The humans had fought back with everything they had, and now, the Zelthar Dominion was on the defensive. The once mighty invaders, who had believed Earth would fall under their control without struggle, were now scrambling to maintain what little ground they still held. With each passing day, it became more and more clear that the humans were not going to surrender their planet without a fight. They were not just surviving, they were winning. Naomi Alvarez stood in front of a large map, a look of determination in her eyes. The human forces had taken the upper hand, but they still had a long way to go. The Zelthars were not defeated yet, and their forces still held several key positions on Earth. To truly end the war, the humans needed to strike at the heart of the Zelthar Dominion's operations. They needed to destroy the remaining Zelthar command centers, those last strongholds that could direct reinforcements and supply lines to the scattered enemy forces. Naomi addressed the gathered commanders. "We've come far, but we're not done yet. The Zelthars are desperate. We can't give them a chance to regroup. We strike now, while they're weakened. This is our moment." Her voice carried across the room, and the commanders nodded in agreement. It had been a long road to this point, and they knew that the final push would require everything they had. There was no turning back. The plan was set into motion. The human forces were scattered across the globe, with small but powerful units operating in every major theater of the war. Their forces were united now, working together in a way they never had before. The global network of resistance groups and military units had come together to form a single, cohesive fighting force, one that would make its final stand against the invaders. The key to this final push was surprise. The humans knew the Zelthars had become more cautious, more hesitant. Their previous victories had shaken the invaders, and they were no longer confident in their ability to control the planet. The humans would use that to their advantage. They would strike quickly, decisively, and without warning. On the night of the attack, the air was thick with tension. All across the world, human forces gathered, preparing for the largest and most important assault they had ever made. Naomi Alvarez, now known as a leader and symbol of the human resistance, stood by the command center, watching as her troops readied themselves for battle. The moment the sun set, the humans moved. All at once, coordinated strikes hit the remaining Zelthar strongholds. Each attack was carefully planned and executed with precision. The humans, despite having far fewer advanced weapons and resources, were more organized than ever. They moved swiftly and silently, attacking in waves and forcing the Zelthars to scatter and regroup under pressure. In the first wave of attacks, human forces targeted Zelthar supply lines. These lines had been the backbone of their invasion, and cutting them off would cripple the enemy. Human soldiers, working in small teams, infiltrated enemy camps and destroyed critical infrastructure, supply depots, communications hubs, and energy sources. The Zelthars, caught off guard by the sudden intensity of the attacks, were unable to stop the humans from wreaking havoc on their supply chains. The second wave of attacks focused on the remaining Zelthar command centers. These massive fortresses, which had once been thought invulnerable, were now under siege. The human forces, using tactics they had perfected over the course of the war, began to breach the Zelthar defenses. With the help of Earth's wildlife and natural terrain, they managed to bypass many of the enemy's high-tech security systems. The humans' knowledge of their planet, their understanding of how to use it to their advantage, was proving to be their greatest strength. One of the largest and most important of the Zelthar command centers lay deep in the mountains. This was the final stronghold of the invaders, the last place where they could call for reinforcements. If it fell, the Zelthars would have no way of continuing their campaign. Naomi knew this would be the toughest challenge yet, but she also knew it had to be done. Her team, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and survivalists, trekked through the dense forest that surrounded the mountains. They knew the terrain better than the Zelthars, and it was that knowledge that allowed them to slip past enemy patrols unnoticed. They moved quietly, using the shadows to their advantage, until they reached the mountain base where the command center was located. The humans launched their attack under the cover of darkness, and chaos erupted inside the Zelthar base. The Zelthars, taken by surprise, fought back with everything they had, but it was clear that they were overwhelmed. The humans knew how to use the land to their advantage, ambushing the invaders from above, striking when they least expected it, and never giving them a moment to regroup. Naomi Alvarez led the charge as her team breached the command center's gates. The Zelthar soldiers inside fought fiercely, but the humans were relentless. They had seen the horrors of the invasion. They had lost friends and families, and they were not about to let the invaders take their world. It was a brutal fight, but in the end, the humans were victorious. The fall of the Zelthar command center was a decisive moment. The remaining Zelthar forces, scattered and without direction, had no choice but to retreat. Their empire was in ruins, their invasion force shattered. Earth had proven to be a place no one could conquer, not even the most powerful military in the galaxy. As the sun began to rise on the day after the battle, Naomi and her team stood victorious on the mountain's peak, looking down at the ruined command center below. The war was over. Earth had been saved. Naomi's voice was filled with pride as she spoke to her team. We did it. We fought for our planet, for our families, and we won. The world, once again, was theirs. The war had ended. The Zelthars had been driven from Earth. Their once mighty invasion force, crushed by the determined humans and the unpredictable power of the planet itself, was no more. It had been a long, grueling struggle, but Earth had emerged victorious. In the days following the fall of the Zelthar Command Center, the world began to heal. The humans, though exhausted from the long battle, were filled with a sense of triumph. The victory was more than just a military success. It was a statement. Earth had proven that no matter how strong the invaders, no matter how advanced their technology, there was one thing they could never overcome: the strength and will of humanity. Naomi Alvarez stood on the steps of a government building, looking out over the city below. The sun was shining brightly, a stark contrast to the dark days of war. The streets were filled with people, families reunited, soldiers returning home, and children playing in the streets once again. The air was thick with the scent of victory and the promise of a peaceful future. Naomi had become a symbol of hope for humanity. She wasn't a soldier by training, but through her leadership and unwavering determination, she had become the face of the resistance. Now, as the world celebrated its hard-won peace, she was still humble. She knew that the victory had come not because of one person, but because of the combined efforts of millions. It was the spirit of the human race that had carried them through. "We did it," Naomi whispered to herself. "We saved our world." The sounds of celebration filled the air around her. The people had won, but they had not forgotten the cost of the war. There were many who had lost loved ones, homes, and dreams. The scars of the conflict were still visible, but the humans were strong. They had endured, and now they would rebuild. Meanwhile, the Zelthars, now scattered across the galaxy, had been forced to retreat. Their fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, was now in ruins. The Dominion had underestimated Earth and its people, and they paid the price. The Galactic Council, once an ally to the Zelthars, had turned their backs on the invaders, acknowledging the humans' victory. Earth was no longer seen as a simple, unimportant planet. It was now recognized as a force to be reckoned with. The humans, though victorious, knew that they could never let their guard down. They had faced the greatest threat they had ever known, and they had survived. But the galaxy was vast, and there would always be other dangers lurking in the shadows. The key, Naomi knew, was not to forget the lessons they had learned during the war. They had come together as one, fighting for their world and their future, and they could never lose that unity. A new era was beginning for humanity. It was an era of peace, but also an era of readiness. The people of Earth were no longer the weak, divided species they had once been. They were stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. The Zelthars had tried to conquer Earth, but they had underestimated the power of a species willing to fight for its survival. Naomi's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of her closest allies, a group of soldiers, engineers, and survivors who had fought alongside her during the war approach. They had been with her every step of the way, through the darkest moments and the hardest battles. They were more than just friends, they were family. "We couldn't have done it without you," Naomi said to them, her voice filled with gratitude. One of the soldiers, a man named Eric, smiled and shook his head. "We couldn't have done it without you, Naomi. You brought us together. You showed us what it means to fight for something bigger than ourselves." Naomi smiled, but she knew the truth. The victory had been won not by one person, but by the strength of humanity as a whole. It had been a collective effort, a force of will that no invader could ever hope to overcome. The humans had not only fought back against the Zelthars, they had shown the universe what Earth was capable of. As Naomi looked out over the city, she saw a future that was brighter than she could have imagined. There was still work to be done, still wounds to heal, but the people of Earth were no longer divided. They were no longer just a collection of nations. They were a united world, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. The victory over the Zelfars had changed everything. Earth was no longer a forgotten planet, an afterthought in the vastness of space. It was now a symbol of strength, resilience, and hope. The humans had proven that no matter how powerful an enemy might be, they would never give up. They would never surrender. They would fight, and they would win. Naomi turned to her friends, her team. "We've won the war, but now we have a new challenge ahead of us. We have to rebuild. We have to make sure that our world remains strong, united, and ready for whatever comes next." Her words were met with nods of agreement. The war was over, but the work of rebuilding the world had just begun. The people of Earth were ready for this new challenge. They were ready to build a future that would honor the sacrifices made during the war and ensure that no one would ever threaten their world again. As the sun set over the city, Naomi stood tall, looking out at the horizon. Earth had survived. Humanity had proven that they were not weak, not helpless, and not to be underestimated. They were stronger than anyone had ever imagined. And as the stars twinkled above, Naomi knew that the galaxy would never forget what Earth had accomplished. The galaxy had laughed at Earth until they learned the truth. Earth was a Class 13 Deathworld, and humanity was its greatest weapon.